Hi everyone, I'm Grandmaster Magesh Panchanathan. Welcome to Kings and Queens Chess Academy's YouTube channel. Today we are starting a new series called Grandmaster Diaries. Basically, my idea behind this is to just share what I went through as a chess player. This doesn't have to be necessarily me teaching you what I did great. It's more about, looking at the good and bad things that happened in my games, and sometimes even things that happened just because I was in the right place at the right time. It has nothing to do with, how I figure out things. So it's just an honest conversation that I want to have. I wanted to have for a long time, right? The point is that not everything is understood in my own games. So I cannot stand here and honestly tell you that this is what you do and this is how you get here, right? This, I mean, if it was that easy, I guess most of the coaches would just be telling their students, work on this, do these things and get there, right? So there are a lot of variables that to me are actually unpredictable or something that you don't understand. But of course, we don't necessarily accept these things to ourselves, right? We always tend to believe. When I say we, I mean like most of the chess players. I'm just talking about chess in this perspective. We can always talk about this in a bigger perspective too. But right now, for this discussion, I want to keep this about chess. So when we talk about something that we know, that makes a lot more sense to our stories. Like, yes, I worked hard. I was having time trouble, but I did this and I fixed it. I was having, tactical issues, and I studied that book and I fixed it. And so these stories are much easier to tell to yourself and to others compared to I had time trouble and I was working on some things and it just vanished. That doesn't make any sense, does it? But sometimes it's actually what happens, right? To start in this journey of understanding what is going on, the first thing we need is to be intellectually honest. So the first video on this series of Grandmaster Diaries I want to make is about intellectual honesty. One of the things I've noticed in the recent years as being a coach is that my perspective has changed a lot, or I have to say that I've added a few things to my perspective to see how my students think and what I need my students to do. One thing you want your students to do, as all coaches would believe, is to accept their mistakes. They should be ready to accept what they did wrong, and that's the only way to move forward. Yeah. So if someone makes a mistake and you think about it, if they need to train on that particular aspect, or if they need to really work on that aspect, how else are they going to do it if they don't acknowledge that mistake, right? And yet, time and again, I will always notice something that, someone would come and tell me that I saw this move, but I thought this would happen, right? When I would get this feeling that, oh, probably my student did not see it. And they're not lying to me, right? It's not that they want to deliberately lie something to me, right? I noticed that this has happened a lot of times in my games too. And I want to start today's video with showing a great example of what happens in some of these games and why we should be realistic with our students and the younger generation when they're doing these things too, because we all do it, right? It's no exception. So let's jump into this game. I played this game in 2009 against Scottish Grandmaster Jonathan Rosen. He's a pretty strong Grandmaster, and he was, he's written books, and he's a good author. He had written articles and stuff like that. I had known about him. He had also had training sessions with a lot of my friends per se, so I knew that he was pretty good. And so just a little bit of a background into the game. I was this was the year 2009. I was, what should I say? I was probably in a happy place. That's the best word I can put. I would just walk into games without doing any preparation or whatsoever, and I would play the game with utmost confidence. Right? I would just play like I'm going to win, and even though I'm not prepared for most of the games, I would just walk in there and mentally be in the right place. Again, I wish I know how I did that. I wish I can do that again. I walk into a lot of games today. I have a lot of self-doubt. I look at the game. I look at my opponent. I start wondering, am I in good form? I've been teaching for so many years, right? All these questions creep in. But somehow that year, that season, I was just walking in, playing, and I was just happy, right? And I would also like you users to take a note. I think people really undervalue this in preparation. They talk about openings, they talk about endgames, mid games, calculation, all of those things. But just remember one thing: if you're not mentally in the right place, I don't think you can give the best results, no matter how well prepared you are. Right? It can offset. a few things, of course, right? Let's say you're mentally a little off, but you have so much training in your, you know, in your system that you're able to offset. It's possible, but I think there should be a lot of value to mental happiness and, you know, being in the right place. So let's go on to the critical part. So I played white. I was playing the main line. Uh, my opponent is playing the Sicilian Khan Paulson, I think. Yeah, Khan. So I'm really bad with opening names, by the way. My students know that all the time. And so this is just the open Sicilian, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because that's not part of our discussion. This is the bind structure. So white has a pawn on c4 and e4, and the black pawn on d6 is a little behind. And usually the break of d5 is kind of an important idea in this kind of setup, but it doesn't happen easily, right? White pieces are guarding them pretty well. So going forward, I'm just going to finish all the development. King h1 again is a very, very common idea because I don't want to stay in this diagonal. So I move out of the way, queen c7, bishop d2. So everything is pretty much done here. And up to this point, I'm just playing out of my knowledge from before. And I'm just playing natural moves. I knew these basic openings. I cannot say I didn't know any of it. I knew some of the basic openings. But around this time, I was usually avoiding main lines. I was not playing main lines. I was just playing knight f3, g3, bg2 setups. Or I was playing king's Indian attack. If you're not familiar with it, you can look it up. These are openings that you can play without studying a lot. You can just play by general themes. But this particular opening, I ended up going for the open Sicilian, even though my opponent has been studying and has been current. It has to do with my mental state. Before the game, I just sat there thinking, what should I do? And most of the time, I would be afraid to confront my opponent with, you know, what I think could be their strength and what I think could be my weakness. But I just felt, you know what? I'll figure it out. I'll play the game. Let's see what happens, right? Again, even if I am not figuring it out, I'm feeling that way. That's really putting me at a good spot, right? So he plays h5 here. And I'm already a little thinking, I mean, I wouldn't say nervous, but I'm already thinking this is not something that I'm usually facing, but it's a very common idea. I have seen it before, but it's also something that's more forcing in the sense that black is saying, I'm going to play some knight g4 ideas. You cannot play h3 because if you play h3 and if you try to take my knight, the black pawn will take back, and there's a possible attack on the king side, right? We also know that there is also a diagonal issue here. And on top of it, there are some issues like this. And knight g4 was one of the ideas that I talked about. And more common is also just h4 and h3. So all of this put together, black is basically saying that I'm not just castling and playing a regular game with you. I am playing a little bit more aggressive or forcing here, right? So I think a little bit, and I go for knight to d4. I bring my knight back because I feel like, okay, he has given this square as a weakness. So at some point, my knight needs to come back in. Would be good for me. And my opponent played g6. So here I probably start thinking deep into my variations. Probably, I don't know how much I spent time exactly. This is 11 years ago. But I'm just vaguely remembering that I did spend some amount of time here. And I'm going to jump into what happened first and then come back and discuss what, went on. I mean, what I can think retrospectively about it. So I played f5 here. At this point, I'm already thinking about a piece sacrifice, which I ended up eventually doing. So pawn takes in e5. This I thought was the critical variation. And now black clearly has established some good things, you know. Black is not castled, but this is really good for black. And I also cannot challenge this bishop easily because this knight is always blocking. So at this point, it's critical that white does something serious, and I did play knight to e6. So this was my whole idea. A piece sacrifice, and I wanted to open up the king. I think it's fair enough to say it looks pretty good, right? So the main variation, of course, is capture, capture. Now I considered knight c5 and knight f8. And in my variations, I was mainly looking at knight c5. That was considered like the main move for my calculation. I didn't really spend too much time on knight f8, maybe a little bit. So once this happened, I just realized that I'm threatening to play bishop g6 and I'm also threatening to play bishop g5. And both of them would lead to good. By the way, I probably have to think a little bit. I'm not so sure now if I was calculating this or this. Just I was pointing out bishop to g6. My memory tells me maybe I was considering knight f8 as a main move. again, I'm just going to be honest with you guys, saying I don't know. I don't know what exactly is that I was calculating. I did calculate both the moves though, you know. I did look at both the moves. My opponent chose Knight f8. It turns out Knight c5 is the more critical line. I'm not going to bore you guys with too much of depth. You can always look it up. It's a very interesting game. I would say you can do analysis in this game because it's a lot of calculation and interesting variations. So from that perspective, you can look it up. But this discussion is more about you know, a certain point which we're heading to. So Knight f8 is stopping bishop to g6. So my natural move was bishop g5. Now black seriously has some trouble. Yeah, this knight is under attack, and the next move I intend to play rook to f7, and that is a serious problem for black because this bishop will be pinned to the queen, and at the least I'll win the bishop back for the piece I gave. And anytime this knight moves, he also has to watch out for bishop to g6 check. So at this point I was pretty happy with this position. And then rook g8, the most important comeback or counter attack for black. What this does is says, you know what, I don't care about your knight. I'm actually going to look at the pawn on g2 because I have this bishop over here as well, right? So black is going to take on g2 and win a queen there. And this move also stops knight g6. So this seems to actually take care of all black's problems. Now, if I simply try to, let's say, defend my bishop with h4 or something like that, the problem is I'm giving up my only threat, or the real threat. Bishop takes f6. And I ended up finding a great sequence, that is bishop takes f6, bishop takes g2 check, and queen takes g2. So I'm actually sacrificing my queen here after rook takes g2. Now the point of this variation is when the king takes, black can play bishop takes f6, and black gets this beautiful queen g7 check. So I really cannot play rook takes f6. If I take the bishop back, there's queen g7 check. And even if I throw my knight in for a fork, black always gets away with the check first, and then the bishop gets out of the trouble, right? So I was looking at this, and I was, but then of course I found the beautiful knight d5, which is actually an intermediate move. Most of you probably heard of this idea. That is, when I capture, you capture. I do not recapture you, the most natural move. Instead, I play an intermediate move, or they call it an intermezzo. This intermediate move basically keeps my option to take the rook still. Nothing's changed there, but I have really created a better scenario for myself here, right? So I actually was able to get two intermediate moves, which is after queen moves, I actually take this bishop too. And this rook is all along just sitting there like it could run away, but it unfortunately cannot, right? If the rook goes to g8, there's a beautiful idea here. That is a checkmate in 3. You can pause the video if you want to quickly find it. Hopefully you did. It's rook takes, and bishop g6 check. The only block is bishop here, and you can see this beautiful checkmate. So I'm a huge fan of Paul Morphy. If this kind of a checkmate happened on my board, I would have thought, oh, that's awesome. Except I guess my rook, if it was out, it would have been nicer. But okay, so going back, this would have been nice. But my opponent decided to just take the pawn. I took the rook. And once I kind of got here, I knew I was just crushing. Yeah, white has a rook and a bishop I'm sorry, white has a rook and 2 bishops at this point for the queen. That in itself is good enough, but the king is super weak, and this is just lost. So he played a few more moves. I'm just going to go through that. King d7, bishop f5, and queen a5. So this eventually just leads to a finish. I take and I play check. Now the king is kind of helpless in this position. He goes in, I take check, and finally rook f1 threatening mate, which is pretty much unstoppable. He threw in a check here on, I played king h1, and this was basically where he decided to throw in the towel and resign. And I obviously was feeling amazing. As you can see, you probably cannot see this particular rating in the video. I'm about 100 points below. My rating is 2493, and Rausen's rating is 2591. So he's 100 points above me, and I won this game in like, very nice fashion. So the most important question, which I want to talk about today, is right here. How much of this did I actually see? The fact is, I did not see the most important defense for black, that is rook to g8. In this position, I'm going to get rid of these arrows for you guys and remove this. Here, bishop g5 looks almost winning for white, if not for rook g8. It's winning right here. Now, I talk to my students all the time saying, listen, if your opponent has only one possible move to survive, and if you didn't find it, that's not good, right? This is a very bad calculation, in my opinion, right now, if I look at it, right? Because bishop g5 is just winning in most of the other moves, and rook g8 probably is the only critical move that I have to calculate. It turns out rook g8 is bad, so maybe there are other moves eventually that black has to play. But rook g8 might as well be winning. You don't know that if you didn't calculate that, right? The fact is that I assessed this position probably to be winning or better, and then when rook g8 came in, it was a big surprise. Oh no, I probably messed up. I'm losing. I'm playing against a super GM. No, not a super GM. I'm playing against this Grandmaster who's much higher rated than me, much more experienced than me, and I'm probably just I missed something and I'm probably lost. But luckily, I found knight d5. I started calculating a little bit more here. I found knight d5, and I also found it fast enough that I could actually lie to myself and tell a story that I probably intuitively had that idea, right? If I had spent maybe 20 minutes here, it would be clear to me, to my opponent, that saying, oh, you know what? He didn't see this move. But I remember that I figured out that knight d5 move, which is takes, and then this move is winning for me pretty quickly once I reach this position. And that helped me build the story. So after the game, Rawson and we both were chatting, and he asked me, when did this idea come about? And he was basically curious. And I was like, I saw this when I played 96. I had this idea at that point, obviously, right? And it was just a casual conversation. Thinking about it now, I'm pretty sure he didn't believe me when I said it. I don't know what exactly his thoughts were. But the point was, I was telling myself a story. And this happens with most chess players, in my opinion, right? We all have a story to tell to ourselves. This is why I'm not calling this a lie. It's not a lie. I did not lie to my opponent saying, listen, I figured it out. No, I had a story that I had to myself that was stopping me from looking at the actual truth. The actual truth was I made a terrible calculation error, stumbled on a beautiful move, won this game in style. But that's not a good story. You know, who wants to hear that? The better story is I thought of this brilliant sacrifice. I couldn't calculate all of it, but years of training intuitively somewhere deep in there made me realize that there was something, right? Some brilliant move was going on, and I played it because of this unknown intuition, right? This is the story that I want to tell myself, and this is the story I told the world. Now, even better, I'm going to read my comment. Lucky enough that I actually have my comment from 2009, or actually, I don't know if it was 2009 or when I actually wrote this. And I'm going to read that. So after e5, my comment in this game says, at this point, I was still pondering over a critical variation in the piece sacrifice, which actually happened in the game. I'm talking about 96. I finally was happy to find out the potential queen sacrifice after move 22. Though I was not able to calculate the variations leading after that, I could intuitively feel that it was going to be better for me. So when I read this comment, I felt, okay, this is not true. Of course, retrospectively, right? Later on, this was always lingering in my head. At some point, I revisited when this concept came to me that I realized that I could be telling a lie to myself about how I come up with these moves, right? In some instances, of course. Most of the times it's easy. You can tell. You know a logical path. I saw this move, I calculated this move, and I got that move. But in some instances, this kind of stuff where you don't have an obvious answer, or the obvious answer is actually not going to fit your story, you might end up covering this. And this is very much possible for all players, in my opinion. So you have to watch out for this. To learn, you have to acknowledge your problems. To acknowledge your problem, you have to be intellectually honest about what went on in a game. You could have been the biggest idiot playing the worst possible move. And if you don't recognize that, you're not going to fix it, right? You could have also found a brilliant move. There's nothing wrong with it. So you have to find that balance. I read a book about a year ago called Atomic Habits, which is a great book, by the way. I would recommend all viewers to actually read that. That's a great book. And he talks about this particular idea of how we tell ourselves stories and how that could actually hurt us. It could actually also help us. For example, there is a story in my head that I am bad at openings. That there's also a story in my head that I am actually good at endgames, right? And this story built over years. So I was teaching some games, I was playing some end games. Someone gave me a pat in the back saying, "Oh, that's a brilliant end game." That became another thing. My coach saying, "Oh, you are actually studying end games," and that led to 10 more things saying, "Oh, you know what? I'm actually doing good at end games." The story keeps building over a period of time. Now, this helps and also hurts. It helps me because when I go into an end game, I'm super confident. I don't care if I'm playing Magnus Carlsen. I'm thinking, you know what? I got this. I might totally not have this, but I feel like I got this, right? It also hurts me because every time I want to sit here and study openings, I'm thinking, oh, I'm not so good at openings. Maybe I shouldn't be looking at it, right? So the problem is I have the good and bad based on these stories. And the only thing that I want the viewers to take from this video is that you should know that you have these stories. As simple as that, right? Just remember that what you're telling yourself could be a lie. You could be looking at moves, you could be missing moves, you could be not understanding the position. Anything could be happening there. The more intellectually honest you are, the easier it is for you to fix it, right? The more you keep telling yourself stories, it's going to be a long and hard process. Now, again, you can stumble into answers. It's very much possible. You might be telling yourself stories. I still became a GM. I still worked on certain things and I still got better, even with these stories, which is what happens in most cases. I just think it'll be much faster for any player who's more intellectually honest and figures out what problems it is. You don't have to disclose it to the world, right? It's actually for yourself. You don't have to go out and say, listen, I just played terrible things. I blunder all the time. No, it's just that you can think about your game in a way saying, this is what I'm doing and this is why I should not be doing it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I would probably be coming up with a little bit more. Again, I just want to have simple, honest discussions about what is good and bad, um, and based on my experiences. All right. Thank you.